day, right? But it's a big red flag when a person's leading with, you should read Settlers, right? Because that person is probably not going to see me as a human being. They see me as white skin, oppression, end of story. And it's just like, I can't.
More importantly,
I can't communicate with
a Democrat,
yeah.
right? That person is a Democrat, right? They are in favor of capitalism. Like, that is the bottom line, right? Like, we shouldn't obscure these matters, right? Just like saying socialism isn't on the agenda in India means you're in favor of capitalism in India. That's what it means, right? If you're in favor of Mao's block of 4 classes because India isn't really capitalist, India's as capitalist as it's gonna fucking get.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No,
right?
that is Sahil's position. Yeah.
The point is that, the peripheral world is not going to save us, right? It's great to have comrades in India, and we want to do everything we can to facilitate the development of the left there. It's in an extremely abject condition. But, the interesting thing about young people, unlike mine and Chris's generation, is that they have thought about socialism in America. And that's what we need to think about. That would be the most important thing, socialism in America is a fundamental question for every poor peasant woman who has to drug her child on the side of a field in order to cut sugar cane because to put her child to sleep so she can go and work, right? Which is very common in India, right? In other words, the poorest of the poor in India need a socialist party in the United States. That's what they fucking need, right? They need socialism in the West, in the core of capitalism. When Chris and I were young, the revolution was everywhere else, right?
Arguably, it still is. Arguably, it still is for the online left. I would say the left in general.
For a lot of idiots, right? For a lot of people who want to abdicate, because that's what it's about. They want to abdicate the fundamental task, right? Which, after all, has been, seriously damaged by a whole generation pouring itself into Sanders and the DSA and thus into capitalist politics. And, deciding that universal health care is the farthest horizon of their political ambition, right? Which has really happened to the students when I was a young teacher, my students, the millennials. And we see this neo-Stalinist return. As for Lenin, Lenin is first of all, people don't even know what he means. Imperialism means Bonapartism. Imperialism is not what happens in the periphery. It's most fundamentally an issue in the core, right? Which is why a lot of Lenin's data in that book, he expects you to be able to read, right? And he says, I had to write this in Aesopian language. That book is actually very little about overseas colonialism. He says almost nothing about Britain and France, who were the great European colonial powers of that day. His examples are all drawn from Germany and the United States, right? That's where his data comes from. And he's critical of the great English anti-colonial thinker of his day, J.A. Hobson, right? It's a critique of Hilferding and Hobson. It's a dialectical critique of that antinomy of revisionist social democracy on the one hand, Hilferding, and the liberal critique of colonialism, which is what the vast majority of the pro-Palestinian, settlers, blah, blah, blah people are. They're basically let them be poor, let them be barbaric, let them have their fascism, let them have their Islamism, let them have their Hindutva, let them have their authoritarianism. Just let's not be responsible for it. Let's not send our troops over there. That's the extent of their politics, right? Or we shouldn't pay, for sending people overseas. It's much lamer than John Hobson was in 1901, criticizing the British in South Africa and, of course, around the world.
I feel
so
like
people read that.
the big one you dropped it in there just as you were going, but it's to bring in what? How did you say it? So you're just saying pro-Palestinian activism itself, just writ large, is part of.
No, I'm not saying every pro-Palestinian person, but like the center of that activism, right, is just nationalist, right? That's all that it is. It's pro-Hamas. Let's be plain. Nobody wants to, because there is no criticism of Hamas. The PFLP isn't going to criticize Hamas. The nominal left in Palestine is explicitly self-subordinated to Hamas, which the left should criticize, right? The left should criticize our leftist comrades in Palestine to the extent that they haven't been killed off by, mainly other right-wing Palestinians or imprisoned or killed by the Israelis.
Well, at this point, it's pretty much the Israelis, though. I mean, they've basically bombed.
But if you're talking about like eliminating political enemies, targeting the left, targeting free thinking, targeting people who want, a secular and social society, Hamas is your enemy.
Okay.
Right. Hamas, I went to school in Palestine.